Bible, Revelation.
We're picking up in Revelation 21, second to the last chapter in our Bible. And what it has here is we've just finished with Satan finally being judged. He's thrown into the lake of fire. Anyone's name who's not found in the book of life is thrown into the lake of fire. So we see this final judgment, which is the second death, which is the lake of fire. And then we move into 21. It says, "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth." We see this in Isaiah 65. He talks about that also. "For the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea." And that's interesting, why that's mentioned. Sea sometimes relates to the nations, but it seems like what's happening here is there's a new heaven, a new earth. I think it's a reformed heaven and earth. 2 Peter talks about we're looking for a new heaven and a new earth where righteousness dwells. He says we're looking for a second judgment of fire where the earth and its works are burned up. And it seems like that's what we moved into here. We've moved into the final judgment of the earth and its works, and we have a new heaven and a new earth. I think not necessarily, and I don't know for sure, but not necessarily a new ball of mud that spins around the sun, but just a whole new government of what's going on the earth. And he says, verse 2, "I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband." So here, Jerusalem, this new Jerusalem, is called the bride, the dwelling place of God. And in essence, what we just saw in chapter 19, I think, was the marriage supper of the Lamb, or 20, the marriage supper of the Lamb. And those that the bride has made herself ready, and that was the bride. The bride was the people. And here it says also the bride is this Jerusalem. Well, how does that fit? But in one way, the people of God behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. It goes on to say, "And he shall be with them, and they shall be his people." He dwells in them. The people of God become the tabernacle, become his dwelling place, become his Jerusalem. And so there's that the kind of allegorical or metaphorical or whatever. There's the mixture of the physical Jerusalem, this new Jerusalem, and also the place that God dwells with men. And so it says in verse 3, "And I heard a voice from the throne saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is among men. He shall dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be among them. And he shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall no longer be any death. There shall no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away." And this is the hope, what we usually talk about, the hope of heaven. This is the new heaven, when all of the stuff that's been a problem on this earth is wiped away, and Jesus takes care of it all. There's a new place to live. And he actually dwells in his people. Remember in Genesis, he walked with Adam in the cool of the night. There was fellowship there, and then when man sinned, when Adam and Eve sinned, and God was saying, "Where are you?" They ran away from him. And finally here what we have is God coming back, dwelling with his people. Now, at the end of the age, what we hear is the church of God crying out, "Oh, come." The Spirit and the church say, "Come to the Lord." They're wanting him to come. Now when their sin has been dealt with and they finally realize the redemption that they've been a part of, that they don't run away from God at this point, but they're asking, "Lord, you come. Dwell with us again." Verse 5, "And he who sits on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new." He said, "It is done." Verse 6, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega." How often have we seen that in the scriptures? That's repeated over and over again, and several times here in the book of Revelation. One, it looks like it's the Father saying it, and then in chapter 1, verse 17, definitely Jesus saying it, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega." So each one identifying, the Father and the Son identify as Alpha and Omega, which one reason we'd say the Son is divine. He's deity. He's God in the flesh. "The beginning and the end. I will give to those one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes," verse 7, "will inherit these things. I will be his God, and he shall be my people." And then the warning. "But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral persons and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." There, that's defined finally as the second death. It is the final death. It's the final judgment, is this lake of fire. And then it says, verse 9, "And one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and spoke with me, saying, Come here, and I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And here, once again, then he shows the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, the holy city. And then it describes that in the next few verses, and I'm not going to read over that. It's a lot of description of the stones that the gates are made out of, I got a couple of questions, like it says on each of the foundation stones. On them were the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And I'm thinking, okay, I know 11 for sure, but who's the 12th one? Judas, I don't know that he would qualify. Matthias was voted in. Some people would say, probably Paul. Maybe he could substitute it in there. I had someone in the room here pointing at themselves that they would be maybe the 12th one. But anyway, I had questions like that, but good to read through all those things. The measurements are incredible. If you take them in and you translate them into measurements of our days, like this city is going to be like 1,500 miles wide and 1,500 miles tall. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of spaceships orbiting the Earth, and they take a picture of the Earth from this, and it's just this blue, beautiful orb. And a lot of those pictures are taken not 1,500 miles high, but just a couple hundred miles. So the city that he's talking about here is unbelievable. Like our tour guide in Jerusalem used to say, or Israel, I can describe that in 3 words: unbelievable. And really, it's the dynamics, the size of the city, the glory of the city is unbelievable. And in verse 22, it goes on to say, "And I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb are its temple." Okay? So in one sense, the New Jerusalem is both this beautiful city made of all these things. It's also, the bride is that New Jerusalem. The bride is also the place in which God makes his dwelling, his new body. It's his people. He dwells among, he tabernacles. The words there is he tabernacles in his people. It's interesting that the last feast in the feasts in Israel, you got Passover and Pentecost, and the last one is the Feast of Tabernacles, kind of summing up the end of the age kind of thing. And actually God tabernacles in his people. He lives in his people. We are his new home. We are the place where he dwells in the earth, in one sense. He both sits on his throne and dwells in his people. He can do all of that at one time because he's God. Verse 23, "And the city has no need of the sun or the moon to shine upon them, for the glory of God illumined it, and its lamp and it is the Lamb." And that's kind of the same thing, once again, we see in the Zechariah 14. It says the luminaries dwindle. There's no need for sun and moon, that kind of thing. Same thing we see here at the end when there's this new heaven and new earth. "And the nations shall walk by its light, and the kings of the earth shall bring their glory into it. And in the daytime, for there shall be no night there, its gates shall never be closed." There's no night because there's no sun and moon any longer in this new heaven and new earth, New Jerusalem, this eternal dwelling, because the Lamb, God, the Father, and the Son are what light up the city. You don't need sun and moon. Verse 26, "And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And nothing unclean," verse 27, "nothing unclean and no one who practices abomination and lying shall ever come into it, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life." So here we're seeing the new heaven and the new earth, your reward for giving your life to Jesus, to receiving the forgiveness of sins that comes by the power of his blood, is that your names are written in the Lamb's book of life, and you get to participate and live in this glorious new Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven, which will be for eternity, and which doesn't even need the natural things that we have now for day and night. There'll be no tears, no crying, no pain, no death. And it sounds like heaven. Well, it is heaven. It's heaven come to earth. It's the New Jerusalem come down out of heaven to earth. And it's the place that God finally makes his final dwelling and reigns and rules and well, actually that happened 1,000 years before, but dwells in glory with his people and fellowship with his people. And it lives in this eternal relationship with his bride.